Good evening and good night Pesach to everybody. Welcome to the second annual webinar with Rabbi Hershel Welcher, Chairman of the Kashrus Committee of the Vaad Harabonim Queens, and myself, Chaim Schwartz, Executive Vice President of the Vaad Harabonim Queens. Baruch Hashem, we did this last year and we had a tremendously successful response. People sent in questions and we saw that after this year there was even quite a few thousand shares and likes and views, about 4,000 views, and we appreciate everybody coming to Facebook and to our website to take a look at this and to listen to the Dvar Hashem Zu Halacha, the halachas of Pesach that everybody wants to know about, and everybody is so curious to get the right when it comes to Pesach. Just to make a couple of announcements on behalf of the Vaad Harabonim Queens, I want to thank Reb Noah Morris, who is our social media director, who put together this webinar. I also want to give a great Yasher Koch and across the to Rabbi Welcher, who's sitting next to me, who gives Leilas Kayamim, days and nights, to the Vaad Harabonim, and we thank him for taking his time out before Pesach. I know that Rabbanim are not too busy before Pesach, so thank you for his time. I also want to thank the president of the Vaad Harabonim, Shmuel Marcus, the Rav of Young Israel of Queens Valley, who is our president of the Vaad, and the entire board, who makes everything that we do here at the Vaad, makes it available, makes it happen. I also want to give a couple announcements. The other announcement I want to say is that the Vaad Harabonim Queens will be sponsoring a community-wide Hagalas Kalim at Young Israel of Queens Valley, 141-35 77th Avenue, and we will be from 1 to 6 on Sunday afternoon, April 14th. Bring your Kalim. Please note that the Kalim should not be used, your utensils, equipment should not be used 24 hours before. We don't kosher glass, it should be entirely clean. And we will not kosher plastic and the sort, only pure metal, bechers, silverware, pots that are completely clean, and we are happy to do that at no charge as a service to the community. Now I'd like to bring in the Rav, Rabbi Welcher, and we thank you very much again for giving your time. We had a tremendous response on all the platforms that we publicized this year, and I just want to jump right into the questions this year. A lot of the questions this year are the same as last year, but a lot of different questions. And we'll start off with the most common question. So I don't know if the Rav knows, but there's a new, relatively new tofa'ah, as they say, experience here in Klal Yisrael, that people like to go away, particularly they like to go to Orlando for Yom Tov. And apparently in Orlando and many other vacation areas, the condominiums that people are renting, they come with glass stovetops. So we wanted to know, many people wanted to know, we got many of these questions. Is it mutter, A, to use the glass top? B, how would a person kosher the glass top? Is it possible to kosher a glass top? And C, if it's not, we have a few questions of, is there different ways or different items that one can use, which we actually have with us, to show to the camera. As soon as the Rav finishes the answer, we can bring in the demonstration.
In general, let us begin with the fact that there are more records in Hilchos Pesach that we do not, certainly not for Pesach. If this applies to the whole year or not, there's b'machlokas shnuya. But for Pesach, there are more records the fact that we do not kosher glass. Now, as far as Pesach is concerned, we treat glass as cheres. So this is a major problem.
And cheres is...
Cheres, earthenware, cannot be koshered. That's halacha psuka, that we cannot kosher earthenware kelim. And consequently, according to the view of the Ramah, which is the practice of Ashkenazic Jewry, we do not kosher glass, right. Certainly for Pesach, we do not kosher it. For the rest of the year, it's b'machlokas shnuya, and then different organizations have different standards, but that's not the subject of today. And the problem is the burner portion of the glass top is really not a problem, because me'ikar adin, it really does not need to be kosher at all, because it has a constant fire under it. And that's what the Ramah records in Chaim only as a chumrah to kosher the grates that we cook upon. And consequently, the glass, that portion of the glass, if one left it on for a short amount of time, it certainly would be kosher for Pesach. The problem is that one cannot cover the rest of a glass top stove. I have a friend who bought a glass top stove, but he put a blech on it for Shabbos, and I went to visit him Sunday, and he had his stovetop in about 3,000 pieces. is not designed for that type of heat, and consequently it just disintegrated. So that's the problem, that how to cover such a glass top in a way which will not cause it to crack. I don't know the answer to that problem. And to use it, as some suggest, well, the burners are kosher and we're going to leave the glass uncovered. I mean, I don't think any of us in our own home would leave the enamel of the stove uncovered for Pesach, because things inevitably, we wind up touching pots to them, things spill, and there are hot things, and we touch hot things to it. And especially in Ashkenazic practice, in the Siman Tov Mem Zayin Sif Yud, there are more records than Nois and Tam Lifgam, meaning a utensil which was not used for more than 24 hours. So normally in your Adeya, it cannot make anything else usher. Nothing else becomes prohibited by contact with it. If I took a milchika pot, a dairy pot, and I hadn't used it for hot dairy for 24 hours, and I cooked Friday night's chicken soup in it, the chicken soup would be kosher.
Mm-hmm.
The pach would need to be kosher, but the chicken soup would be kosher. According to the Svardim, this remains true even when it comes to Pesach and Chometz, and that's the Mechaber and Tov Mem Zayin Yud. But the Ramah's shita is, and this is the process of Ashkenazic Jewry, that even if the utensil was not used for more than 24 hours, the food is still prohibited. And in Siman Tov Mem Beis, the Chaim goes so far as to tell us that one would have to throw that food out. One could not save it even to use it after Pesach. It's obligatory to destroy it on Pesach, as we would destroy actual chametz. So I don't really have a solution for those that have glass top stoves.
So if I could just show this to the camera. So we got this question from someone here in Queens. This is called a diffuser, and it goes on top of the glass stove top. And he wanted to know if this would be kosher. If we'd be able to use this for Pesach.
So I don't see how this would really be of help for Pesach. As I said, the glass burner itself, I don't have a problem using for Pesach. My problem is the rest of the stovetop, and the diffuser is only designed to cover the area where the fire is. So the rest of the stovetop is going to be left uncovered. So I'm not sure what they accomplished in terms of my concerns. And the general concerns of Klal Yisrael, that when for Pesach we cover the entire stovetop.
So we got a question from someone else along the same lines, who just sent in not too long ago. He wanted something called a Lomai cooktop mat. In fact, I took a picture of it from the website. I printed it. Apparently, it's a mat which goes totally over the the cooking area. So would that address the problem?
If there were a mat, well, this Lomai is designed, as it says, for electric ranges.
Protect your stovetop from baked-on food and scratches.
It says specifically it's designed and engineered for electrical ranges. So I have no idea if it is safe to use on a glass top. If it is safe to use on a glass top, and particularly if it's both waterproof at the same time as covering
waterproof, because we don't want to have
contact liquid. We don't want liquid coming in contact through this some type of cloth. But if it would be waterproof and it's safe to use around the gas stove, so this perhaps would be the solution to cover all the glass areas which are not next to over the fire itself with this Lomai mat.
So really, what the Rabbi is saying is that these glass cooktops,
they're problematic. Someone called me just the other day. He said, I have mine for about 12 years. I could get it fixed, but it's not in good shape. Should I fix it or not? I said, don't fix it. Buy yourself a new one and don't have a glass top, because it's a problem kashering it for Pesach.
Okay.
So we have a question from Cy Landsberg. Question, for electric heating trays / platas, can you use it for Pesach as long as it's scrubbed off?
We do not typically use that for Pesach, even if it is scrubbed off. And it's probably for the reason that the food does build up on it at times. When things spill, it doesn't burn off and it doesn't run off as it runs off from a grate. There's a buildup of food, and consequently it needs a real koshering, and that would be hard to achieve. It's a very good question. I like the question.
along the lines of cooking and kalim and equipment, someone sent in a question today. Can we use a hot water urn on Pesach that was used during the year? And I just want to point out that this is a very, very common. I don't know what the Rav's.
I have it a million times.
Yeah, we got it quite often this year, and it seems to be many people feel that because it's only hot water, just to be lobbying the question to explain it. Many people feel that just because it's only water, and you're not putting chametz into the urn, and you're not putting chametz onto the spout, ostensibly. So, and apparently it's a, to get a good one is an expense. So many people feel that, or have the question, do they have to get a new one?
This is a very common question. I don't know how many times I've had this question just this year alone.
Maybe people like hot water more this year.
And I have a general rule, and that general rule is whatever is open and in use around the kitchen the whole year, you don't use on Pesach. Because things happen. It's true. It's only a hot water urn. But what happens when I made oatmeal, and I took instant oatmeal, and I poured water in, and perhaps some of it splashed up on the spout, and it's already a question of chametz gomer on the spout. And it's not so easy to kosher it, to truly to kosher it entirely, to clean out all the seams of it. So I would never recommend a person at home that if you use such a thing during the year. I mean, if we consider all that we do to achieve a high standard of kashrus on Pesach, this certainly doesn't fit into using the one we use the whole year around the kitchen, doesn't fit into it. And to truly do proper agola, we really can't do, because these are electrical devices which don't really lend themselves to a proper agola.
Right. I mean, I personally went into Amazing Savings last week, and I saw that they have very affordable.
They're very inexpensive
they're very
nowadays.
expensive. So you can, a person definitely for $29 or $40, $30 or $40 can definitely purchase one. I had one more question, and this is I noticed actually in my own home, and I wanted to bring it up to the Rav as a question. We have in our own home, above the stove is our microwave, and above the below the microwave and above the stove is the
Hood.
The hood. So how important is it to clean out that hood or to cover the hood?
Let me explain the following. In my own house, I don't clean the hood, but I cover the hood. And the question is a very simple question. As I often explain in the Beis HaKnesses, and obviously Yisrael, our shul, throughout the year we have two safety valves which solve about 90% of our kashrus shaylas. One of them is bittul v'shishim, that if a drop of milk falls into a pot of chicken soup, and there's more than 60 times as much chicken soup as there is milk, so it's mutter to use. And the second thing is, as I mentioned previously, is nois and tam levgam, something which had not been used for the last 24 hours, a utensil. Now, bittul b'shishim, according to all views, Sephardim and Ashkenazim, does not apply on Pesach. What's accepted l'halacha and the Shulchan Aruch is that b'mashu, even a tiny drop of chametz that falls into something which is Pesach is not bottled. Now, add that together with the fact, especially for Ashkenazic Jews, that nois and tam lefgam is also awesome. So then we wind up with the following: the hoods, because of all the fumes that go up into the hood, may contain first of all be'en, and oftentimes if you start to clean out a hood, you find oily residues in it. So which is be'en, which is actual. Now, if there's any chametz went up there, so something that we cooked, and there's an oily residue from chametz, so now if I get some steam from a Pesach pot went up there, and now all I need is it for one drop to fall back down into the pot, and I have a real problem. So consequently, I don't think that one should undertake to clean the hood. It's very, very hard to clean them adequately. But what I do is I put it out of service for Pesach, and I cover it with aluminum foil, so that if any steam goes up, it does not hit the hood, but it hits the aluminum foil.
Okay. We got a lot of questions this year about vitamins, supplements, diet supplements, medications, and there seems to be a little bit of confusion amongst the Olam, and especially today, it seems that people more and more more people are more and more health-minded, and people are taking all sorts of vitamins and supplements and all different types of things, and which is really a good thing, if we could just take the moment to talk about. I don't know if this is the place to talk about, but the official position
Oh,
of
you want
the Vaad Harabonim
yeah.
with the vaccinations.
Yes.
Just maybe now is a chance to say that our official position with the Rishus of the Rav is that the Vaad Harabonim encourages and requires. We ask of our oilam
I feel it's
obligatory to vaccinate and to and to make sure that v'chai
and I just wanted to add to Rabbi Schwartz that about 2 months ago I did an extensive consultation with major Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael, and Pe'echad, all of them said, the ones that I consulted, and I will tell you I consulted with a Yidid of mine, Hershel, the Rav from Bnei Brak, and he said a person that doesn't get vaccinated is mazik derabim. Rabbi Zriel Orbach paskin that it's a chiyuv. Rabbi Sternbach paskin that it's a chiyuv. Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, who's a phenomenal mumcha in medicine, paskin that it's a chiyuv. So it's the position personally that and also Rabbi Weiss also holds that it's a chiyuv. I've had the tshuva on my desk that he wrote about it. We need to protect the community, and we are not capable of doing so if we have a significant amount of people that are not vaccinated. There are all types of young children and people that are immune impaired that are subject to contracting this disease. So I implore really everyone in our community, for the sake of the health of the Rabbim, is to please undertake to vaccinate everyone in your family. The misinformation that's out there that it's associated with autism has been refuted, and in fact the person that perpetrated that study has been defrocked, because the statistics and the information that he used is not only not in agreement with scientific inquiry, it was a total fraud. So I implore everyone to please undertake to vaccinate everyone in your family for the health and safety of everyone in your families. And measles is a very serious disease. It has very, very serious effects between deaths and mental impairment and other very, very serious health issues that arise from it. And one can go on the CDC site and to see, in fact, all that's involved in it.
So just getting back to the question of pills, capsules, before pills, capsules, supplements, vitamins, can a person take it? What should they look for? Do they have to look at a list to find out if it's taka kosher l'pesach?
My recommendation is the following. Let's start with medicines. The general assumption that a person that takes a medicine on a regular basis because he has some type of condition, whether it's high blood pressure or whether it's a cholesterol issue or whether he's taking for the diabetic reasons, all of these, a person may not stop taking them on Yom Tov without consent both of his doctor and his Rav. So the default position is to continue taking these medicines. Now, there's no shaila at all the medicines that had come in tablet form, in pill form, that they're mutter. And that I certainly, would be ready to paskin. Where the area where medicines become tricky, and that really each person has to discuss his condition and the particular medicine with his own Rav, deals with both either liquid medicines or chewable medicines. Those are the two that present the problem. Now, supplements are a very, very tricky area because we don't really know the standards by which they're produced. We know generally that when it comes, I've explored this with a doctor years back, when we're dealing with conventional medicines, we know the process by which they're made, and the process by which they're made generally renders them inedible, and consequently they do not really present a kashrus problem. When we're dealing with supplements, we really do not have standards for it, and consequently it's a case-by-case study, and if one has a supplement that one feels that one should take, then one has to in fact make inquiry of those in the field that have knowledge of that particular supplement and see if it's suitable for Pesach or not.
So along those lines, we had a question from someone, actually a few people. They want to know about do kosher prenatal vitamins have to be kosher for Pesach?
I'm not concerned with them, with the concern for Pesach. I mean, it's a chumrah to have kosher ones in the first place, and the chumras and kashrus are admirable. but I don't see any additional need for a Hershel for Pesach.
So one person actually told me that her doctor had prescribed them even though she was not prenatal, but just I guess for the fact that she needed the iron or whatever it was.
People need iron, and iron deficiency is a serious matter.
So that would go into the same category.
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Along those lines.
You're done. I have a question.
Along those lines, we just if we can get straight together as it pertains to soap, shampoos, deodorants.
There was a statement issued by the Rabbanim in Chicago, the CRC, and its Bezdin, a number of years ago, signed by a number of leading rabbinic figures in Chicago. And basically, personally, I endorsed that particular statement, that all the shampoos and the lotions, all of these things do not present a problem on Pesach. What I'm concerned about is those things that go in the mouth, or on the mouth, on the outside, chapsticks, etc. There I get concerned. But everything which is not meant to be ingested.
And that would include toothpaste as well?
Toothpaste that goes into the mouth, I personally feel it's a lechatchila to be machman.
So once you get a kosher Pesach?
There are many. The kashrus, the national agencies have every year a good number of brands that don't even need a special hashgacha for Pesach. That they've checked, that they've researched, that are sure that are kosher to Pesach.
Okay, so we had a question that came in from Facebook from Jennifer Meltzer. If I drop something like, for instance, a potato on the kitchen floor, is it still permitted to use if I rinse it off? Because we're not koshering the floor. So that's a good question.
She didn't indicate if it's hot or it's not hot. Certainly, if it's not hot, anything solid substance that you can wash off, you can use on Pesach even if it fell on the floor. There is a general practice in many parts of the community, and like personally on Hug is the same way, that something which is not so subject to washing off and it falls on the floor, we put it away and we use it after Pesach. Because of the fact that the floor, we track the whole world into a house on the floor. So we can never state fully that we're sure that there's not a mashu or a tiny drop of chametz on the floor. So if it's not possible really to wash it off, or a hot item that fell on the floor, I would put away. I wouldn't throw it away necessarily, but I would save it for after Pesach use.
A question that I got from one of the people who sent in. This is nogea to selling chametz, and I'll read the question. If I'm going to Florida for the first days and coming back to New York for the second days, can I bring my chametz item I sold in Florida back to New York with me? For example, toothbrushes, retainers, vitamins.
He's talking about those things which are not chametz in the first place, as we just mentioned. So real chametz would be a isagoma for him to take with him. He probably would be over. It's very likely if he transported live chametz in such fashion that I wonder if he would even be over by Yero by Yemotze in such a case. There's a shayla nachronim about it. If it just since he wants to have this chametz and he's moving it around with him, he may even violate by Yero by Yemotze. He certainly is an iser involved in it. But if he's dealing with toothbrushes and toothpastes and lotions, which midina are certainly not chametz, and most of them are probably usable on Pesach in the first place, he certainly can bring them back.
So what would be the halacha? Let's say someone went down to Florida, the few days before Pesach, and they brought, a whole stock of pretzels and.
It's a Yisagomor to bring it back on Pesach. Mamash a Yisagomor. There's a shah, as I mentioned, there's a shah that achronim. It's certainly also with the Rabbanon, and it may in fact even involve an Isa Deraisa as well. I believe in the end of Simon Tov Mem Ches there's a discussion of this.
One question that we always get is about milk, in particular Chalostam milk, purchasing it on Yom Tif.
The general practice is that we try to buy milk that has some level of hashgacha for Pesach, and that's not per se because of the milk itself. The milk, those that drink the Chalostam have a very good basis for doing so. In fact, it was just republished recently, Belsky Zatzal's research a few years ago, because the nature of the supervision, governmental supervision, changed. And I had a lengthy discussion with this about 3-4 years ago in the summer with Moshe Elephant, Shlita of the OU. And basically what happened is that one branch of government cut back and another branch of government stepped in. And in fact, there was greater supervision of the milk, just from a different arm of the government. The one that had been doing it previously cut back somewhat in its inspections, and another arm of the government stepped in as doing more inspections. And the total number of inspections is greater today than it was in the time that Moshe Feinstein wrote his tshuva. So those that use the Cholov Stam have a good basis to do so. What we were most concerned about for Pesach was the question that we talked about: how were they bottled? What else might have been used in those machines? So there's a preference to have some level of hashgacha that is kosher Pesach. Now there's also a question in buying milk, and this touches other things, milk and eggs on Pesach. If they were milked on Pesach itself, or the eggs were laid on Pesach itself, so then there's a question that's involved. This is a Yoredeya question, a complex question of Zev, meaning that this product was produced by the input of chametz and non-chametz. The animal might have eaten chametz, thicker grain, and non-chametz factors as well. So the halacha is that before Pesach we are mekel, not in accordance with the chochmas adam or the chay adam, and the nishmas adam is machmer in this regard, but the midrash in Klal Yisrael is to be mekel and zev zager before Pesach. So in earlier years they were makbid to buy all the milk and egg products before Pesach. We're a little bit less makbid about it today because generally speaking the milk does not get to market that fast. And it's not that you went to the farm and you got a freshly milked bottle of milk. It's the milk from the time it's on the farm until it arrives in the stores is a pretty lengthy process. So usually over a number of weeks, in fact, until it actually arrives from what I understand. And consequently, we're a little bit less makbid about it. And so if one goes in, but again, there's a preference to have some level of hashgacha for Pesach if you live in a community where that's possible. And there are some in the community that are makbid dafka to use Cholov Yisrael to have a higher level of supervision for Pesach.
Okay, I have two questions that came in from Facebook. The first one is from Paul Finkelstein. Is quinoa problematic to use on Pesach?
I share the belief of those Rabbanim that quinoa is not kidneys, but it does have to have hashgacha for Pesach. But was discovered, there are two places in the world that quinoa comes from. One of them is a very remote area in Bolivia. You fly down to Lima and you have to travel 5 hours overland by car to reach this remote part of Bolivia. And when people finally got to where the quinoa was processed, what they discovered was that the sacks used to transport the quinoa were sacks which had been used for other of the 5 species of grain. So therefore there was a chametz issue, not because of the quinoa, but because of just how it was processed. And consequently, the kashrus agencies decided at that point that the quinoa for Pesach has to have a hashgacha. And I should mention in this regard, this is very important as well for people in the Sephardic community that eat rice on Pesach. Rice itself is not an issue, but one has to be sure, both because of the supplements that may be put into it, plus the plant that it's processed in, is it processed in a place where they process other grains? So it's important to ascertain that the rice that a member of the Sephardic community would use for Pesach is in fact kosher Pesach. Beyond the kidneys is not a problem for him, but he has to be sure that it was processed in a fashion which did not compromise its status of being kosher Pesach.
Second question?
Okay, the second question is from Daniel Enser. I think I'm saying that right. Some vinegar is corn-based, but some is wheat-based. Is it good to just remove all vinegar?
The general practice in this country, Heinz vinegar is made from corn. Much to the shock of most people that hear this for the first time. And most vinegar in this country is made from corn. And consequently, even if one is makbid on chametz gom, not to sell chametz gomer on Pesach, as I personally am, nevertheless, the vinegar and products containing vinegar is not a problem. And the most primary reason is overwhelmingly the vinegar is made from corn. There are other reasons too, but that's a sufficient reason.
Okay, there was a question that was going around today, which if the Rav doesn't want to answer, that's fine too. The OK gives a hashgacha to a pre-seasoned pan, which is a pre-seasoned pan which they pre-season with soybean oil.
Somebody asked me to show you
yes,
today.
and and we emailed them, and they said they wrote back that it's self-kosher during the production process, and there's no issue of kitnius. So, of course, the OK is a very respected and has very respected poskim. Does the Rav have any...
I believe that this is similar. I didn't know that. I told the person that called me today, I don't really know the facts. A person called me, I think, from Virginia today, which is Shiloh. Yeah. And I said, listen, the OK is a very reliable organization. I'm sure they have a basis. And I told them a number of things that I could think of off the top of my head. And that is, first of all, we don't even know that Shem and Kitni is also. That's where Machloikishnu, even though we're Machmer. But to be concerned with the Nois and Tamlif Gam of it, perhaps, who says we have to be concerned? But I said, I don't really know all the factors that they may have considered, but I believe there's a tshuva of Rabelsky in his tshuva sefer, where he deals with oils that are put on pots in the production process, and he also felt that they did not, and those were non-kosher oils, that he did not feel that they presented a kashrus problem. So I presume, it sounds to me like the OK has a similar position in that regard, and I don't have a difficulty with it.
Okay, so yeah, the OK wrote in one of the responses that not all types of cast iron pans are heated to the degree that they're kosher, but this company wants the customers to be assured that they have only used kosher oils in their process, and I guess that it has gone to the heating degree.
So clearly they've done the research.
They've done the research,
you know.
So the fact that they've heated it to the degree where it's self-kosher. So that's something that one can certainly...
Yeah, certainly if you're dealing with a kitnius issue, we're not dealing with even an issue of chametz altogether.
Okay. I got a question from somebody about Ricola. I'm assuming, based on what the Rav said earlier, that original Swiss herb sugar-free Ricola, which we allow in the stores under Schlesinger, but it would need to have a Pesach to Hashgacha.
Certainly, anything which has flavors in it has the potential to be both non-kosher and non-kosher Pesach. So we would certainly need to know that it's kosher Pesach.
Okay, well, one of the very common questions that we get this year was about salmon, particularly Kirkland salmon, which is under the OU, which is being sold in Costco, which would not only be, I guess, Kirkland salmon, but I guess any fresh fish or fish that wouldn't be smoked, which I think that's, of course, would need hashgacha. But let's say a person would buy fresh fish packaged, in the vacuum pack. Would that be okay with that?
I don't see a problem with it for Pesach. I would recommend that when you take it out, just rinse it off. But I do not see an issue with it. I mean, in general, the standard that we have for meats and chickens is that anything which is not ground is kosher Pesach, basically, no matter where and when it was made, under almost all circumstances. But again, it's preferable to wash it off, because maybe somewhere in the processing something got into it that shouldn't be there.
Well, we have found in our stores over the years more and more that gone from the butcher shops have gone from not just cutting meat and grinding meat, but also now they put out, they want to have a selection. They put out all sorts of flavors and different matam and lamineim in order to sell more product. So a lot of those, let's say, shawarma seasoning and you'll have barbecue seasoning and this seasoning, that teriyaki seasoning. So it's not, the process has become a little bit more.
The process is not as clean as it once was. There is a mila, let's put it this way, to have it, to buy it when it's certified kosher Pesach. But I don't think we've reached the point that we should aser it if someone rinsed it off. Again, we're talking about non-ground product.
Non-ground bag and like or frozen meat.
Yes. Yeah.
Someone wanted to know about the Dixie cups. Is there any issue with hot cups or paper plates like Dixie?
We have the OU and its publication certifies that the kosher Pesach, the Dixie cups, Dixie hot cups.
No,
what's the official name of them?
Dixie to go.
Dixie to go. Okay.
Well, so what would be the standard as it pertains to paper plates?
I think that dinner they're all mutter, yet there is some mokum to be machmer because of a remote chashash of kitnius that may be associated with it. Personally, I only use plastic plates on Pesach for that reason.
Turning to women's cosmetics.
Well, for that matter, I would have used styrofoam when it's available. I also would use Pesach.
Turning to women's cosmetics. So, apparently there are different types of lipsticks, and there's lipsticks on the like the crayon or the stick, and then you have liquid lipstick. Does one have to ascertain that those are?
I don't.
Well, I'll make a two-pronged question. The lipsticks that are brought down in, let's say, Rabbi Bess's guide, that maybe are not recommended or maybe not best to use. What's the rough sheet about that? And second of all, the liquid ones, is that more problematic?
The liquids are a little bit more problematic, and in general, anything which is on the lips, which gets involved in the food, I'm a little skittish about when it comes to Pesach. So, I would certainly follow Rabbi Bess's recommendations in that regard.
Now, let's say you'll have a lipstick that is not, which is recommended for Pesach, but it's lipstick is not cheap, and especially if a person has a particular affinity for a color or whatever it might be, and it's hard to get the next one. Can they cut off or
listen, I would certainly feel that normally a person,
do they even have to cut it off?
The Shulchan Aruch states the following, that anything that we use during the year which was open, we should not use on Pesach. And here's something which women put on the lips. The lips certainly have chametz at times on them, so certainly it would fit into that realm. Now, I don't see it as being b'mokum hefsid, because they could buy the next one and put this one away and use it after Pesach. It's going to get used up anyhow, so it's certainly not b'mokum hefsid. If a woman wound up in an uncomfortable situation where she could not replace it, so I would think that there's a basis to shave off the outside and continue to use it.
Continue to use it. A question today. I spoke in Orchana in Rego Park. So one of the common questions of young teenage girls is about retainers, braces, v'chule, as it pertains to chametz eating before Pesach. What?
Let me tell you my personal standard in this regard. The issue of the retainers and the braces has to do with eating particularly hot solid chametz, because we are machmer. It's a chumrah, and there's certainly machmer on Pesach with that chumrah, that a hot salad is always considered a kli rishon. So we can take foods into our mouth which are definitely at the point of yatzoledis, it happens. And consequently, there's an issue that the retainers and the braces may absorb something. So what I recommend to people to do, now usually these things are non-kasherable, especially the retainers. If you pour hot water on them, you'll destroy them. So I recommend to people, number one, certainly not to eat anything hot in the last 24 hours before Pesach. And generally speaking, there are not that many things that we take in the mouth that are actual yatzoledis. So on Pesach, the possibility of having a problem, and this is only as a shita which is a chumrah, is small, number one. Now, those people that have retainers or braces that they would, and in a situation that they can't remove them, I also recommend that for 24 hours before this Zman Isa chametz, they not eat solid chametz. Now, some people have come to me and tell me, Rabbi, why are you so machmer? Why you should be, let us eat chametz until the Zman Isa. I spoke to an orthodontist, a ben Torah, in my shul. He said, Rabbi, why are you so makel? You can look inside a retainer and 5 days later there's still food inside it. So I think in the middle is somewhere a procket, because a lot what's in the retainer deteriorates, and I would say it's already not considered actual chametz already at that point. But I think 24 hours for a person that has braces or retainer that they shouldn't eat solid chametz is certainly appropriate.
Okay, so what about? I had another question. What about the wax? There's wax that they have to put in.
I
think need to be replaced. There's wax that
if they can replace it, they should replace it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, what if someone did eat hot chametz less than 24 hours?
Listen, as I said, we're only dealing with a chumrah. We don't take that many foods into our mouth which are actual yatzoledis. So, did it actually become chametz in the last 24 hours? Probably not. Elamai, there's some be'en that's left, so we have to try to rinse out as well as we can, but that's it, you know, and more than that, Lanit Natar Lamalachi Asharas.
No.
Okay, so we have a few questions that came in. From Avi Wartzel, he said, what about canola? I guess he's asking about canola products like canola oil, like are those kosher Pesach? That's my understanding.
So I believe that the kashrus agencies give hashkocha to canola. There's been a ferment about it. In fact, a few years ago, in the OU guide to it, there was an article stating that canola is kidneys, and in the back of the book there was hashkocha on canola.
We talk canola or cottonseed?
Canola.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find it with a reliable hashkocha, I would not have a problem with it. But as I said, I leave to the major. If you find it with a reliable hashkocha, I would use it. If not, I wouldn't use it anyhow.
So it says OUP, you're good.
Yes, I'm fine with it, yes.
Okay.
All right, another question.
Now, cottonseed oil, I should mention that the minhag in Eretz Yisrael is to consider cottonseed oil kidneys. In Chutz La'aretz, cottonseed oil is considered a preferred oil for Pesach, and it's interesting that in the Litvische world, the head for cottonseed oil comes from Reb Chaim Brisk, and Reb Chaim Brisk's svara was that kidneys is only osir if the seed itself is consumed. But if the seed itself is not consumed, and only the oil of the seed is consumed, there's no xeros kidneys on it. So this, in fact, is one of the brisker coolest that we have.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Okay. All right, so Roya Moses asks, is there a more extensive list for items that don't need the P available for Spartum? Do you guys know of any lists?
I have no idea.
that would.
That's beyond my purview.
If you look in the Vaad guide, you'll see that, which is going to be up on our website. You'll see that we discuss the difference between Ashkenazim and Sfardim as it comes to glass and kashrei, which is maybe something I don't know if we have time to get into. We're going a little long, but it certainly, as the Rav said earlier about rice, that rice can't be enriched, can't be parboiled. It has to be raw in order, even for Sfardim, and from what I understand, they have to be checked 3 times before because you may find wheat inside. That's
Okay.
Another question?
Okay, so another question is, someone on a pick line, unable to eat food via the mouth, is there any way that they can fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah?
Unfortunately, there's no means of doing that. Achilas matzah means to ingest matzah. And in fact, my chalas asuros did not exist in terms of a person that does not ingest in the normal fashion. So I wish the person in Refuah Shleima, they should be zeicha in the future to be mekayim the mitzvah properly.
Along those lines, we did get a question today about someone who can't have gluten. So what would be the way for them to be mekayim the mitzvah of achilas matzah?
Well, the question is how sensitive they actually are to gluten. And this really needs one has to look at very, very carefully. Someone came to me a good number of years ago and he said about a month or so before Pesach, 6 weeks before Pesach, that he has a problem with gluten, that he's been diagnosed, and therefore what should he do for Pesach? So I started to look into the problem, research the problem, because it also affects Suda Shabbos. Came back to me a few weeks later, they changed the diagnosis. Gluten is not his problem, it's a different problem, but gluten is not the problem. A lot of people today imagine that they have a gluten problem. I'm sure that there are people that do have a gluten problem, but when we're dealing that this has been medically diagnosed, this is a person that's imagining because of the fads in the world today of not having gluten, that I have a gluten problem, we're better off without gluten. If a person has a medical condition, then the question is how serious the medical condition is, and that he needs to consult with preferably a frum doctor and a Rav to determine what he should do. We have oats as the least amount of gluten. Spelt has less gluten than wheat, but more than oats has. And I do recommend to people to consult with their own Rav what's the most lenient share for matzah that a person can have. And that's a matter for a person to ask his own Rav.
So, Agav, maybe just to go a little bit to transfer to a different topic, what's the Rav Shita about the minimum share for a person that's able to drink wine and able to eat matzah? I know in our house we use the color guided code from Rabbi.
Yeah, that's what we use at my Seder. We use the color guided code. It follows the Psakim of Moshe Feinstein, Zatzal, and he had two milas. He was Rabban Shakol B'nai Agayla, and he was one of the Asra in New York. So certainly his Psakim are first and foremost in our minds when we come to do anything lechatchila.
And how much wine should a person have for the?
Ramesh's final conclusion, I don't know why there's still confusion about this. Initially, when they measured, came out with the shiurim, they presumed it was, the halacha is that one has to use an egg without the shell to determine, and it's an egg and a half is the reduce. It's just very difficult to work with, so they worked with eggs with shells. And their initial calculation was that a displacement of the average sized egg was 2.2 ounces, and 1.5 eggs was 3.3 ounces. But someone came along, some Ludwig, a good Ludwig, and he decided he's going to do it with shelled eggs. And because they thought that the difference was only very, very minimal, and they discovered that the difference was in fact 1/4 ounce, 0.25. And the actual displacement of the average egg was 1.95 ounces. So an egg and a half came out to slightly under 3. Right. So the Chayra Ramoshe's final shiurim is that a 3-ounce cup suffices for everything except Friday night Kiddush. And Friday night Kiddush is only for the person that's actually making Kiddush. If everyone's being yotze with the balabaya, so according to Ramoshe, he needs just under 4.5 ounces, 4.42 ounces. And his kais, according to Ramoshe, and just under 4.5 ounces. And
so this year, everybody would have to really have that.
Well, they have to be the yotze with the balabayas.
Oh,
so then the balabayas has to have a lot of kos of 4.5, and everyone else can have a kos of 3 ounces. And that's fine.
Okay.
Now, people should know if they have difficulty, because for medical conditions or digestive reasons, certainly if they have a 3-ounce kos, they're all to hold the entire chiyuv is to drink 1.5 ounces. That's all. So sachakol for the whole seder, you need 6 ounces of wine or grape juice, whatever you have. Yeah.
We got a question from one of our chashuvah listeners, and he wanted to know about having a rosé for the Dalet Kaisis, because we know
the whites.
The white. I'm sorry, a white for Dalet Kaisis. We know that there's a hiddur to have red wine.
So let me explain a little bit about red wine altogether. There is a very fundamental mistake that many make, and I was just reminded of it because somebody brought it up to me again today, that they take a white wine and they add a little bit of red grape juice or red wine to it, and voila, that they have, they now have a red wine. So I explained to him that that's an error. A red wine and a white wine are two different minim, and the difference is in the red wine, they leave the skins in as it's fermenting, and in the white wine is without the skins. Now we do know medically they're two different things, right? The world of cardiology says there's certain advantages to the chemicals in red wines for the health of one's heart. Right. It's not a color, it's a different mitzias. So that's what we're dealing with, first of all. We're not dealing with putting food coloring in to make it red. A red one is a different mitzias than a white one. Now, in general, the halacha has a preference for the seder for red wine, but a person that doesn't like red wine and is not going to have really drink it enthusiastically would be far better off drinking a white wine, which will drink with it to te'oven, where he has a geschmack, where he approaches the mitzvah in an enthusiastic sense. That's the way to be mekayim a mitzvah.
So certainly the adding just a little bit of red in is going to.
It's a total mistake altogether. There's no shaykhs with anything in halacha.
Any more questions?
Yeah, there's a good question here. Is CBD oil kosher for Pesach? CBD is it's made from I believe cannabis. It has some good properties. A lot of doctors recommend CBD oil being used.
It's beyond my expertise.
Okay, that's a hard pass.
And mine too.
So we have someone asking, can you please explain the issue with granite and quartz? Why is there an issue at all?
Okay, let me explain very simply. Stone is one of the...
We could just be malabing the question. I believe the question is about koshering?
Yes.
Koshering the...
It's koshering, the question is koshering them for Pesach. Now,
They don't
okay, the
specify.
question is kasher
Kasher.
for Pesach. Stone is, according to the Shulchan Aruch, one of the materials that can't be kasher for Pesach. The problem is, are we dealing with a real piece of stone, or we're dealing with a composite? Now, one of the ways of telling if it's a composite, if the design is uniform throughout, then you know it's a composite, because that does not occur in nature. In nature, the design varies. Every foot is a different design. If it's a composite, so then there's already a machlekes, even a composite stone, is that of a din cheres or not. And personally, I'm certainly machmer for Pesach, not to kasher a composite. And most of the quartz is a composite. There is a small amount of quartz, I forgot the name of it, but there is a small amount of quartz which is not composite stone. But most of it is composite, and that's really the issue. So the issue is to define if you have a composite, and then you cannot kasher it for Pesach, because there's a din of cheres, or it's a solid piece of stone that you may have, a solid piece of granite here, or an Eretz Yisrael, a solid piece of marble of shayish, and that is kasherable for Pesach.
So really, there's really no issue with.
There's no issue. It's a question very simply.
What
the mitzias, what the facts are on the ground. If it's a solid piece of stone coming from nature, that way it's kasherable. And I would add to the fact that someone just in fact asked me the other day about this, that commonly they put sealants on it so that nothing penetrates them, but does the sealant itself present the problem? In fact, that Adam Godel, Shlita, once asked me this, and I at that time did not have an answer for him. But I subsequently did ask Rav Scheinberg's Zatzal about it, and he told me not to be concerned with the sealants. It's a miyut and whatever, a miyut, and therefore one could kasher them for Pesach.
Yes, absorbed in. The question that we received as well also this year was about the as we know, there's two types of sinks. There's the undermount and the overmount. And overmount, just to explain to the listeners, is that the sink rises up above the sink, and it goes on top of the counter. The undermount is that it comes up to the granite to formica. So the area where the sink will meet the undermount, does that present a problem of be'en, or maybe not being able to kasher inside? It's actually, I believe there's a glue or some sort of a compound that's used in order to close it, that the water shouldn't go.
Well, generally it tends to be closed. It remains closed because otherwise you would have water shooting under the sink. I mean, you do need to clean it, I think, but that's...
Do you need to cover it, or...?
No, I don't. Was not noyek to cover it out of you.
Once you kasher the sink, that would be okay. More questions?
Yeah. Can pot lids made of glass with a metal rim and what is possibly rubber between the two be kashered with hagala?
Well, as I mentioned previously, the minhag based on the Ramah is not to kasher glass for Pesach. So you can't, for a whole year, you can kasher such a thing, lidaiti. But that's kach kibalti, that it's such that glass is kasherable for a whole year. Again, that is the machlekes. Yes, there are machlekes, but my understanding and my Kabbalah is that it's mutter.
Okay.
Well, we get that often by the kashering. People bring that, and we have to disappoint them and send them away and tell them that you don't kasher for Pesach. Yes, you have a question?
So this is about the Seder. If our young children, 3 to 8 years old, are participating in the Seder, can the adults skip certain parts and say it after the Seder once the kids are sleeping?
If to maintain the attention of the young, children at the Seder, it's interesting. The Gemara says in Pesachim, in Arvei Pesachim, Chayfin Matzah B'leilei Pesachim, which the Rambam interprets to mean that the participants of the Seder should grab the matzahs from each other, and some suggest, in fact, that this is even the basis of stealing the Afikoman. And I have to say, I'm impressed with the particular genius of the Goyin that came up with the idea of stealing the Afikoman, because the Afikoman is used at the end of the meal, so no kid wants to go to sleep before the end of the meal, because he stole the Afikoman and he wants to get his due. But the Ravid learns Pshat, the Ravid says a different Pshat, and the Ravid says we should move the Seder along quickly. The Gemara says Kadesh Yishanu Atinoikas, so that the children shouldn't fall asleep. So there are many elements of the Seder which are universal, and I don't think necessarily that one should skip them. But it's interesting, in the Rambam, you do not have the entire discussion or the 10 makas, 40 makas, 50 makas, that does not appear in the Haggadah of the Rambam. In Dayenu, it does not appear. in the Rambam's Haggadah. So I believe Dayenu does appear in Svardish Haggadah. So somebody told, whatever, Svardish Bochu told me today. So those parts of the Haggadah, one could certainly, if necessary, if one wanted to do them later, I would not have a problem in leaving them out for the sake of the children. But there are many parts of the Haggadah we cannot leave out. The Rambam defines in Perek Zayin the necessary elements of the Seder, the Maskal B'Gnusim, B'Sayim B'Shevach, Avodah V'Yinu, Metchilo, the questions that there has to be a question and answer format. So all of that, I don't think, and Dash in the Parsha of Rami Ovid Ovi, which is that's the essential, really, part of the Haggadah itself. And that's probably, if people wanted to leave something out, they would probably leave that part out, because that's the part that the children don't learn in school for whatever reason, and they have very little to say about. But that's really the essence of the Seder, is the Parsha of Rami Ovid Ovi. But in terms of the how many makas there were, 10, 40, or 50, and the Dayenu, if one wanted to do that later, I would not have a difficulty with that.
Yeah, we have another question. What do you do for baby food if it has chametz?
Very simply, you don't use it.
Okay.
We got the question also about a baby formula that has kidneys.
The general practice is most baby formulas are made of kidneys, and a child up until the age of 6 about is usually considered in the halacha to be a chayla she'ein by sakana. So certainly for little children, infants, the minhag has been lahokil to use soy-based formulas which have kidneys in them. We get different bottles for Pesach because the bottles lay in chametz the entire year, and we should wash them not in the kitchen.
Is there a chumrah, or is there a minhag to repolish the silver aside from the covet of Yom Tiv? But is there any? Let's say the leichter. Is there any Indian in Bechlal to
Those things that are on the table should be cleansed in some fashion. I don't say you have to polish it, but they should be cleansed in some fashion.
Because they may come in contact.
Yeah, we don't, in fact, do the tray that we use the whole year. We use it on Pesach, but in fact we put something under it. We do not let it sit on the table on Pesach directly for that reason, because it's in contact with chametz the whole year.
Anything which is exposed to chametz.
Yeah, there is some Indian to clean it in some fashion,
Yes.
So we had a question. I believe you guys answered it. Rabbi have answered it before. Just let me know. We can go, just for the sake of time. We can pass it and they can listen after. If a doctor recommends a sick person should take a vitamin and this person usually takes sublingual vitamin, which is kosher, how would the person know if it is okay for Pesach? Is it better to get a non-kosher pill instead for Pesach?
It's a question that needs thought. I'm not going to answer that question off the cuff.
So a person would have to speak to their Rav.
To speak to their own Rav, yes.
Send us an email. info@queensvaad.org.
We got one last question. I don't know if the Rav wants to touch this about cigarettes on Pesach. I mean, obviously, of course, the person shouldn't smoke. Unfortunately, there are people who are addicted to smoking, and Bisman, as I think cigarettes is the Rabbi Miyutai. Is there a shita?
Listen, I think no, I've not looked into the matter. Let me first put that as a preference. But let's put it this way. Anything which has a flavor to it, you certainly cannot use on Pesach. Flavors have immense problems of kashrus on Pesach. There's certainly, in the e-cigarette world, this is certainly the case that the flavors cannot be used. The minhag ha'olam has been to be made with regular tobacco products to use them on Pesach. I presume the reason is because the general processing of them does not involve chametz. So again, one would be far better off though not smoking at all. It's certainly not a mile in one's health, and it's certainly not a schooler for arichas yom. That it's not.
People are looking for schools today.
Yeah.
I could say, just be made personally, that when I was just got married, my in-laws, Leah Shalom, were living in Chicago, and I had the opportunity to daven Rabbi Chaim Goldzweig, and I took the opportunity to ask him this question about cigarettes, and he felt that benigud, in opposition to a very popular Pesach guide that writes that it's chametz gomer, he said that it is not chametz gomer, and anybody that knows the Metzias knows that cigarettes
the leaves are processed by themselves in their own places.
That it's 100% mutter. He was extremely upset that someone wrote in his guide that there was chametz gomer. He didn't know where the person was coming from. So that was over 20 years ago,
Yes.
but it was something that they had the opportunity to ask for Chaim Goldsweig, amongst other shilas. But he was very emphatic that he said the same thing. It's not good to smoke, but he was emphatic that he was very nervous that people that are smoking anyway should be in a matzav where they're being told that it's chametz gomer, and to make that achraza, he did not like it. Any more questions?
Yes, we have another question. You might have answered it before. Do you need to cover the backsplash of the kitchen counter, the fan/hood above the stove?
So let me state the following. The hood above the stove should be covered, as we mentioned before. The backsplash behind the stove should also be covered for the same reason that steam hits it. And it's very close. There could be a more severe problem than just drops coming down. You could have a direct connection of steam to it. On my countertops, solely because of the chumrah of Pesach, I could cover the backsplashes with plastic. I don't think there'd be dinner at Tzachiyah to do so once you wash them. But in my kitchen, we cover the backsplashes, even of the countertops, with plastic.
Now, is there also an Indian, as the Rav said earlier, anything that's exposed, like the knobs or the door on the oven door? You have the bar or the refrigerator. I know in our house and my in-laws'
So
house.
some people cover them. You certainly should wash them. What I'm most concerned about is that the handle, the knobs of the stovetop, that is what's a particular problem because they can come in contact with the pots. So I think it's a wise course of action, perhaps to soak them in with some type of cleanser, and maybe even to pour hot water on them.
I know some people. I was actually in a store today, not in Queens, where they were selling covers, dedicated covers, or you could even buy new ones.
Yeah, the truth is, if I had thought about it before, I probably even would have bought new ones.
Or you can cover with aluminum foil.
It doesn't stay. That's the problem.
Would that be dangerous though?
No,
Not for the nose.
not for the nose.
Someone's asking, would it be dangerous to cover the fan/hood above the stove?
If you leave it off, it's not dangerous. There's nothing dangerous about it. If you put it on and you cover it, I don't know what's going to happen exactly. It might burn it out.
Right. Okay, so we want to thank everybody. We want to thank the Rav for his time. We want to thank it seems like we had a lot of interaction with our listeners on Facebook and on social media, on WhatsApp. Again, I want to thank Noah Morris for putting this together. And this forum will be up on the Vaad's website and on our Facebook page. And if anybody has any other questions, I would like to get to Rabbi Welcher a question. So either you can email us info@queensvaad.org, or you can WhatsApp us at 347-680-2603, or you can send an email to the Vaad, again at info@queensvaad.org, and we'll get it to Rabbi Welcher as well. So wishing everybody a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. I want to give the last word to Rabbi Welcher.
I want to wish everyone a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, and I want to end with one final cautionary note, and that is I would suggest strongly that every time you take out a product to use on Pesach, whatever it may be,
Wherever it may be.
and whatever it may be, look at the label before you put it into use to be sure that it's kosher to Pesach. I have always a nightmare story, and I'll share it with you. On Chalamite Pesach a number of years ago, from outside my own community, fortunately, but someone called me, and this is a problem that arose in their own Beis HaKnesses. A woman ordered about a dozen pieces of gefilte fish, rolls of gefilte fish for Pesach. And a Pesach order, they came, she put them in the freezer, and she duly took them out and served them at the Seder and over the first days of Yom Tov. And somewheres at the end of the second day of Yom Tov, someone gave a look at one of them, and they were chametz ones. So just imagine, after all the effort that was put into preparing for Pesach and koshering the house, that you actually served chametz at the Seder. Actual chametz. This is not a question of shaila of chametz, chumras. It has matzah meal that's chametz in it, a chametz, a regular gefilte fish. So I strongly suggest every single package of food, before you put it into use, just look at it. There are many ways someone could have moved a package of food from the non-kosher Pesach section to the kosher Pesach section, and you came by afterwards and just took it off the shelf unbeknown to you. I want to extend to everyone our best brachas for a Chakosha B'Sameach, and may the Rabbi Shalom, the Gemara tells us in Rosh Hashanah, B'Nisan Ligalu, B'Nisan Asidin Ligal, may we be zoiche finally to see the advent of Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Meira Chakosha B'Sameach.
Amen. Thank you.